Today at the Symposium on Violin Studies at Juilliard, this is the fourth day, we had another pedagogy class and heard from performance psychologist Noah Kageyama again. The name of his class was Shrinking the Gap Between Practice and Performance. He offered kind of a long list of psychological hacks to shrink that gap. And the one that I wanted to share that stood out to me the most was to flip the script of what we tell ourselves when we're performing. So he had us try performing a passage and telling ourselves to play it perfectly. And that became the focus of just not making any mistakes, making sure everything was perfect. But then the second time we played the passage, the script was to offer subtle nuance. So that became the focus. Instead of trying not to make any mistakes, now I'm focused on offering dynamic contrast or a bowing or phrasing expression that might be a little bit more nuanced. And it's pretty amazing how that can take the pressure off. So the script that we tell ourselves is something that we do have control over. And it's really interesting to think about it in those terms. Today's masterclass was taught by Cornelia Hurd, the violin professor at Vanderbilt University. I really enjoyed hearing the things that Ms. Hurd had to offer, especially as she, didn't shy away from delving into technique of the students. And so, as I've been watching what most people would call the Franco-Belgian bow arm all week, this week, it's been just really interesting to see little nuances of how it's not the same for everyone. Recently on my channel, someone submitted a comment that was taking issue with the binary aspect of how I sometimes frame, Franco-Belgian versus Russian or Golden Era technique. And it's true that is one way to look at it, that it's not binary, but it's really actually violin technique, especially bow technique, is on a spectrum, or should be on a spectrum. That would be the ideal. And there are principles or attributes of one school or the other, but no two violinists are going to have exactly the same technique. All the student artists at the Symposium play brilliantly with high level functioning technique. And even if they have certain idiosyncrasies, they don't seem to hinder them very much. There's one student that I noticed had a little bit of rigidity in the pinky and the thumb. So, the bow hand was working really well, but there's some rigidity here. And so when Ms. Hurd pointed that out in the masterclass, I thought, that's great. I'm so glad that she is going to try to at least offer a suggestion to try to, release the tension from the pinky and the thumb. And so she told the student to feel that the egg shape, so the roundness, try to get the roundness, and she also had him do it by holding his bow vertically, so that round shape could be there, and not trying to play with the rigid thumb and pinky. But then she also had him do some collé exercises to show the flexibility in the knuckles and the motion in the knuckles. And she also had him do some wrist circles. So while I agree with the idea that this is the egg shape, and that is a change that I would make as well, that is a big difference between the two technical approaches, is that I don't perceive the collé exercise or the motion in the wrist as a motor to being indicative or helpful to attain flexibility. What we usually do is try to avoid that as the motor as itself. So in a Golden Era technique, we aren't using the knuckles or the wrist as the origin of the motion. So that would be the biggest difference between the two schools of technique. That's from my perspective. And I think it's very interesting because there is a lot of crossover that I've witnessed this week. That there are some attributes of what I would consider mainly Russian technique that are represented in the Franco-Belgian technique that I have been witnessing this week. So the two schools are not that far off. I've also seen many of the student artists that have their index finger, placing their bow on the index finger at a deeper point, just like we do in the Golden Era technique. So I think it's good to recognize what we have in common and then also where we differ. And I will share more about the differences because it seems to be that a lot of you that are watching my content are interested, very interested in what are the actual differences. And a common question that I get from you is, can I combine the two? So I will be addressing those two questions to a much greater extent in the future. The questions of what are the fundamental differences between the two techniques, assuming it is a binary, and can I combine the two? Okay, I'm going to head in to the performance by Jamie Laredo tonight, and I will see you guys later.